Hello and welcome to the second leg of the India development debate tonight. Call it Swadeshi Movement 2.0. The Modi government today doubled the import tariffs on almost 330 textile products in a bid to give a fillip to desi manufacturers. The move, which is in line with the Prime Minister's Make in India push, is expected to work as an antidote against cheap imports. It will also boost job opportunities in the textile sector, a highly labor-intensive industry. Remember, last week the import duty on 50 textile products, including jackets, suits and carpets, was hiked to curb cheap imports from China. Interestingly, poorer neighbors like Bangladesh have been exempted from the new tariffs.
Indeed. Now, trade experts say that although these tariffs compatible with the WTO guidelines, it could be seen as a protectionist move by the international community. There is also a belief that it is a classic case of the NDA government once again surrendering to the likes of the Swadeshi Jagrana Manch. On the flip side, it is a raw deal for consumers who will have to shell out more for their clothing requirements. Make in India push it may be, but how long will this handholding really help? It isn't time to think of long-term solutions like tech upgradation and higher competitiveness. On our India development debate this evening, we discussed the hike in textile import duty, but not just that, we also discussed the whole approach to hiking import duty to offset the GST rate cut, its impact on Indian industry and of course you, the consumers. We'll take it across to four very special guests who are joining us. Ashwani Mahajan, National Co-Convener of the Swadeshi Jagrana Manch, Professor Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU. Sanjay Kumar Jain, Chairman CT and MD TT. Maithili Busturmat, Consulting Editor, ET Now. So thanks each one of you for being with us. Maithili, if I may begin with you. This discussion, the trigger point is what has happened today in textile, but we want to look at it from a larger context of this import duty hike going up each time to offset revenue loss from GST rate cuts. India today doubled the import tax on some textile products to about 20%. This has increased duty on fabric-related commodities for the second time in a month. It was done once before, it has happened once again. Are you surprised by the move, or did you see this coming? Because the moment GST tax rates or slabs were cut, this was perhaps bound to follow.
Supriya, I'm afraid the audio is very bad, so I really couldn't hear your question at all. So maybe you could pass this on to somebody else while my audio gets corrected.
Can you hear me now? Is this better? Is my audio with Maithili going through? Okay. I'm going to take this across to Biswajit Dhar, Professor at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU. And Professor Dhar, did you see this coming? The whole approach to doubling import duty on certain textile commodity products, did you see this coming the moment GST rates went down?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of factors here. One is of course the GST rates that you're talking about. The other issue is the depreciation of yuan, and over the last 3 months yuan has depreciated by almost 8%, and that has actually I think sent shivers down the spine of the the textile industry here, because the textiles imports have actually gone up. So and the second factor that I actually mention here is that the textile sector would actually lose several of its subsidies, because now many of the subsidies that India was giving, those can't be given because these are now WTO incompatible, because India has crossed the $1,000 GNP threshold. So all these factors taken together, I was expecting something of this to happen, but I don't think that this should actually be happening over the long term. I think this should only be a short term palliative.
Okay, you're saying it's a short-term measure and that was perhaps needed. Let's get an industry view before we take it to Maithili. Sanjay, is this stop for textile sector a prudent move? Because India has been a big player in that space, and do you believe it's come at the right time? On the contrary, the government had earlier doubled import duty on over 50 textile products, including jackets, suits and carpets, to 20%. Did that have an impact at all? Is this the way to go?
Good evening, everybody. I'll just like to give a bit of context to this. This is actually not a rise. If you look at pre-GST import rates, which had basic custom duties and a countervailing duty, it was much above even today's increased levels. So what the industry has been demanding is just to take us at par to the pre-GST levels. It's not that things have actually increased the way it's being made out as a Swadeshi movement, etc. I would strongly disagree with that. Pre-GST, the overall cost of importing was even higher than what it is after being increased. And still there are many HSN codes where no increases happened in the yarn and fabric stage, where import growths have been huge, humongous, 40, 50, 100% in just a span of 1 year. This of course cannot happen just because of loss of competitiveness overnight. And secondly, I would also like to highlight, over the last 3 to 4 years, India had a surplus textile trade with China. Over the last 3 to 4 years, the textile trade deficit has gone up, and today it's even touching $1.5 billion. So that's a matter of worry, because China is very, very strong in man-made fibers, and they're actually able to sell below cost because they have huge capacities built up for which there are no takers. So we need to keep all this in consideration if you want the domestic industry to grow, if you want employment to come, and if you want us to become strong enough to export, because if we don't have a strong raw material, yarn and fabric base, you can never grow your exports. And another point I'd like to add, which was also said in the introduction, that a lot of countries we have FTAs, like Bangladesh being one of the most prime countries. So with this BCD, there's been no increase or impact on the imports which will come from Bangladesh. And more important to understand is Bangladesh has become a backdoor entry for Chinese fabric. Because
Sanjay,
we don't have a rule of origin in place.
Sanjay, I have a specific question. Sanjay, hang on for a minute. Sanjay, just hang on for a minute. I have a specific question on Bangladesh, and I have a specific question on exactly that concern, that could Bangladesh be used as a route for other countries to trade in. Sanjay Jain, just hold on for a minute. I will take it across to Mr. Ashwini Mahajan of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch before we move any forward. Sanjay may disagree, but is this a win for Swadeshi economics? Is this a win for the Swadeshi lobby? And the question also, Mr. Mahajan, is import duty hike the solution for lower GST rates? I mean, the moment GST rates came down, it was a given that import duties will be hiked. I mean, is that offset really the big solution?
See, today hike of import duty is nothing new in the world, because all over the countries are trying to protect their industry. And now when the country is facing a huge problem of unemployment, and also the fact that textile industry, we need a big boost in budget also. The government, in the last budget itself, the government had given boost to the employment generation in the textile industry by giving them the provident fund provisions. And now this hike in import duty, I think it's in the right direction. The textile industry needed a boost, but yes, on the part of Bangladesh or other countries with whom we have the free trade agreements, we need to look at it that we impose the country of origin conditions. Otherwise, this increase in the import duty will not have much of the impact on the textile industry. So,
I take that point, Mr. Mahajan.
The Swadeshi lobby or the Swadeshi this thing.
Sure, go ahead. As far as the Swadeshi lobby is concerned, go ahead, sir.
Let me complete.
Sure.
Yeah, this is the we believe, though we don't think that government acts according to what we say, but we do believe that protectionism is no bad word. You see, as people try to put it, I have always been maintaining that when in budget the government increased the import duty, or they said that it's a protective tariff. So for electronics and mobile imports. So I think we need to protect our textile industry. We had already missed the bus to a great extent. yes, we must pick up and we must improve our
Sure.
textile industry.
Okay, Mr. Mahajan, allow me to interrupt you there, sir.
As Supriya has already said, that
Sure.
there is a lot of
Allow me to interrupt you there, sir. I want to get a quick word from Maitri as well. You made your opening comment, and I get this sort of broad message there from you, Maitri. I don't want this debate to be sort of focused on the move specific to the textile industry, because this has to be seen in the larger context of what happened first in the budget with the government looking at this route to incentivize manufacturing in certain sectors like electronics, and now they're using it in textiles. So we need to make this a larger debate beyond textiles. And what is your own view? Do you agree with Mr. Mahajan that in the times that we live in, that you need to do whatever it takes to protect your domestic industry? And will such interventions incentivize Make in India really?
Well, Sandeep, the problem really is that protectionism is a very bad word, but it is a bad word in a very ideal world. Today's world is far from ideal. We've seen how President Trump has set off the trade wars, with country after country imposing retaliatory tariffs on each other. So in such a situation, perhaps the government really doesn't have much of an option, again, in the very short run. In the short run, this might help, but in the long run, this is not going to work in our interest, because whenever you raise import tariff, remember, every item that you import is an input into some other final product. So you're basically cutting your nose to spite your face. But again, as I said, in an ideal world, it's not a good thing at all. But in today's world, where it's each country for itself, and the rules of the WTO, the entire philosophy of lowering your tariff barriers has been completely done away with, maybe in the short run, the government feels that it will help both the Make in India as well as employment. Certainly not an ideal situation, far from ideal. What we really need to do is improve our competitiveness, especially in the textile sector, which is a big job generator.
Okay, so especially in the textile sector, which is the big job generator, I'm going to take this across to Professor Biswajit Dhar. And Professor Dhar, I do want to continue with manufacturing for just a little bit more. The idea is to give an edge to local manufacturers, and that's exactly the aim with which this has been done. That's exactly how the government has justified it. But because imported products currently are much cheaper than the ones locally manufactured, but is a 20% import duty going to be enough? That's a specific question on textile. And the larger question also is, has due attention been paid to boost manufacturing enablers in India? I mean, look at land and labor, both contentious issues. On both those issues, government has refused to bite the bullet. So the crucial question is, why have large global players not set up manufacturing base in India? We've got high FDI caps, we've got low tariff barriers, we've got a good domestic market, and yet you don't have a lot of global guys come and make here. Why not?
Yeah, that's the more important question in my view, because we have to ask the question. Also in the context of textiles and clothing, one has to understand the long-term dynamics. Because in the clothing sector, India used to be a major player not too long back, and it is a fact that we have lost ground to countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh, and China has pulled way ahead of us. So I think there is something to be thought about the whole strategy, regarding the textiles and clothing sector. Like in the case of the larger manufacturing sector, that why is it that the manufacturing sector in India is not getting the kind of momentum that we need to provide to this sector? So my view is that despite you having what the government claims is a very investor friendly foreign direct investment regime, you still have a problem that even the domestic investors are not investing in this country. You had your domestic apparel formation rates sagging pretty seriously in the past. We have seen it in the past year. So I think the government will have to have a very serious look as to what has gone wrong with the manufacturing sector. We know certain issues that are there. For instance, again, we'll have this whole usual list of things like infrastructure and all. Then there is this big problem about inverted tariffs, duty rates that we have been talking for a long time. And finally, I think where this present exercise may have a bit of sort of relevance is that the Indian industry does not have a level playing field vis-a-vis its competitors. The competitors have much better, I would say even hand-holding by the government. But here in India, we don't really have this kind of.
I take that point, Professor Dar. Okay, I take that point, Professor Dar.
All these issues need to be.
All these issues need to be fixed. I take that point. Sanjay, coming on the point of the job creation potential. This move again is aimed at creating domestic employment. Given textile is obviously a hugely job-intensive sector, what is the scope of job creation? I mean, what is your own estimate on the kind of jobs that could get created? Because reports suggest that this step could ensure nearly 10.5 crore jobs could be being created. Is that a realistic estimate, or is that being too ambitious? What impact will such moves have on job creation potential?
No, I think so. The textile and clothing industry today directly, indirectly employs about 10 crore people. So we look at, if the momentum is kept and we have support of the government, and of course industry is more than willing to take it forward, we can expect job creation in the next 4-5 years of a few crore people.
Okay, we can expect job creation of a few crore people. I'm going to take this across to Ashwani Mahajan. And Ashwani Mahajan, I'm a big supporter of Make in India. It's going to generate jobs in all of this. But, and many people will perhaps raise eyebrows on hiking duty, but it is not all in vain. If you actually look at mobile phones, higher duty on imports has resulted in increase in domestic manufacturing units, 120 of them. But the irony is that most of these are assembly lines. These are not really making in India. They import and then they assemble here. So the SOPs that they enjoy as Make in India perhaps need to be more focused. The incentives need to be more focused on targeted manufacturing. Are you going to agree with this?
You see, initially, whatever you are saying is correct, but over the years, if you don't protect the domestic industry, the domestic even the spare parts manufacturing will not happen here. So at least we have to start with something, and or if you keep on allowing cheap Chinese products to be imported, or cheap Chinese mobile phones to be imported, then nothing will happen in India then. So at least we have to make a start. Similarly, in textile, this is going to directly impact it, because we have the domestic capacity, but the only problem is the cheap Chinese products coming in. So if you stop these cheap Chinese products, and there has to be some study on how China is sending or dumping their goods in India. And we have already imposed more than 100 the anti-dumping duty on more than 100 items coming from China. We need to do it more, and this and till the time you are able to really decide about the anti-dumping duties, this kind of increase in or hike in the import duty is definitely going to bring a big benefit to the domestic industry. And I think we should think of imposing higher tariffs, because we are already on less than bound rates of tariffs. We have higher bound rates, and I don't know, for whatever reasons the governments they were too much obsessed with the kind of free trade, even if others are trying to impose barriers, tariffs and non-tariffs. We know in USA there are more than 6,000 items on which the non-tariff barriers are being imposed. We are imposing hardly 300 items. So this is something we have to at least be protective to our industry.
I take that point. What you're saying is there is still some headroom for the government to further increase import duties, because we're still within the bound tariff limits. I take that point. Maithili, where does this stop? Because it's being widely speculated that it will be white goods next, tax rates for which were also reduced under the GST, FTAs. So what I'm trying to understand is, where is this going to stop? How much? What sweep of sectors? I mean, how does the government draw Lakshman Rekha the moment it starts using this as a tool to boost competitiveness?
It's a very, very difficult question to answer, and the government has set up a committee to look at the issue of raising tariffs on white goods. But the problem is that the government has to tread a very fine line between trying to, ensure that this tariff hike does not protect inefficient industries. That means tariff hikes are not going to be used to protect inefficient industries, while at the same time shielding domestic industry from the kind of dumping that we have seen from China. Unfortunately, if you really have to prove dumping through the WTO route, the process is too long, the procedure is too long. So in the short term, the government takes a quick fix, as it were, of hiking import tariffs. And Mr. Mahajan is right, this is within our bound rates, so it is not objectionable as far as WTO standards are concerned. But the point is that these are just very, very short term moves. What we really need to do is look at the entire sector, not just textiles, but all of manufacturing in a more holistic fashion, bring about more meaningful changes in ease of doing business, ensure that there is both labor as well as land reform. We've been talking about labor reform for so many years. Bangladesh has a kind of economies of scale that we in India are just not able to achieve. We really do not have the kind of large scale textile units that, say, Bangladeshi companies have. So these are the kind of things that the government needs to work at. So even if they use a short term very balm and not a very good balm of hiking tariffs, they must simultaneously work at removing the long term obstacles to improving the prospects for exports from India, including currency valuation.
Okay, hold that thought now. I'll go back to Professor Dar there. And Professor Dar, in a global environment, this repeated increase in import duty, and some panelists here believe that this is what India must do, especially when the rest of the world is doing it. But the reality also is that India speaks very glowingly about globalization and anti-protectionist and all of that. Won't this repeated action be seen as a protectionist stance? And can you rule out reciprocal action from other countries that matter? And I wonder, what is that going to do to Indian exports? Do we run the risk of similar trade barriers going up elsewhere?
No, I think Indian government will have to give a very clear rationale as to why we are doing it, and it should not be seen as something that is very arbitrary. And as all of us have been saying, that there are good reasons why this measure in the short term makes sense, because there are number of ways in which India is being attacked by China. Through the dumping, through the currency manipulation, and also the kind of incentives that are given to the Chinese players out there, and which the Indian players don't enjoy. So I think the whole issue has to be looked at in a holistic manner. And as I said, that Indian industry deserves a level playing field. So in Indian industry deserves to become competitive in the longer term, and I think that it is up to the government to really examine and put in place a mechanism, and to see that just not the textiles and clothing industry, but industries in general, they come out of this slum that they are. Because today Indian industry is just unable to compete with any of the the peers in the eastern part of our in eastern neighbors, in the ASEAN region.
Okay.
And this is an issue that needs to be
addressed,
given priority and fixed.
Okay, I take that point. Just 3 minutes left on the show. Sanjay, is this a question of competitiveness at the end of the day? And it's not about textiles, it's about Indian manufacturing at large. And Professor Dar spoke about the fact that Indian industry needs to be given a level playing field. Foreign players will say that you're doing that by distorting the level playing field. But is this absolutely imperative for Indian industry to have a level playing field? I mean, without this, is Indian manufacturing's competitiveness in some sense at stake? And by keeping on increasing duties, don't we run the risk of denting the competitiveness of Indian industry?
Level playing field is obviously very, very important, and Indian textile industry doesn't have a level playing field. If you look, Bangladesh enjoys 0% access to European Union. We have to pay 10%. China has put 10% duty on our fabric. Pakistan has 0% access. Similar is the case with Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. The story goes on and on. We are left, we don't have any bilateral agreement which is in our favor. Then how are we really going to grow? And it's known that to grow a manufacturing sector, you need to have a big exports push, because domestic industry is only going to grow at its own pace. And competitiveness, the main problem in textile and clothing is not the cotton base, is the man-made fiber, the synthetic base, where we are not getting the raw materials at competitive prices as against China, Vietnam and other countries. So definitely it's a big question, and that's what the government is trying to address.
All right. I will let Maithili Busturwat have the last word on the show then. And Maithili, very quickly, 2 questions there. Won't this lead to increased prices for consumers? Why should I need to pay more for my next phone if I want an imported brand? Why should I be forced to buy a desi brand? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, on the fiscal side of things, this is perhaps just an exercise in fiscal management. You're taking from Peter to pay Paul.
I'll take your second question first, Supriya. I don't think it will make much of a difference as far as import tariffs are concerned on the revenue side. As to your question about why should the consumer pay more, yes, we might end up paying more. But the fact is, the idea is that if you're going to protect industry at large, and in a world where no country is playing by the rules, do you also try and twist the rules to your advantage, even if it is short term? So it's like a short term, it's like a band-aid, but meanwhile you must work at arriving at longer term solutions to making your industry competitive. But in the short term, when I said in a world which is not a very fair world, maybe you also have to play dirty at times, quote unquote.
Well, it's not a fair world by any stretch of imagination. The global environment that we are living in, India needs to do whatever it can to boost competitiveness. However, it must not come at the cost of its overall message of being a globally active economy. On that note, I can't thank this wonderful panel, Maithili, Sanjay, Mr. Mahajan, and of course, Professor Dhar, for joining us with your perspective on the India development debate.
Thank you very much for being with us. Up next is Top 10 at 10.